I haven't done one of these in a while. I know I he told myself that I want to make one every week, but I guess I'll just do them whenever I feel like saying something. Especially since these are supposed to be way more personal in nature and less something that I do for entertainment. This is just me rambling about whatever. And I guess this topic is probably something I've already talked about. Um, Burnout. I would say burnout from social media, but just social media in general and the internet. I know I've talked endlessly, probably here in the videos and also just in general about how the internet isn't what it used to be. It isn't the thing I loved so much. It really went from being my method of escapism to being the thing I kind of want to run away from, right? Um, See, back in the day, I used to use the internet as a way to escape from life's burdens. I had my friends, I was posting stuff, talking about stuff, um, because I had a really rough upbringing with my family, and also I was getting constantly bullied in school. So the internet was pretty much my safe haven, if that makes sense. Uh, Nowadays, and I don't think it's because, well, I'm 26, I'm not a teenager anymore. I do believe that the internet has just become such a toxic hellhole that I seriously don't see it as an escapism anymore. If anything, I would want to escape from it, or at least a part of it. And it just sucks. It's not what I loved. There's so much algorithmic bullshit and AI and whatever. The rise of fascism and just the vile influx of vile things people are saying more and more openly compared to like years ago. Things that someone from like let's say 2018 or 2019 would deem so extreme, even your average bigot, transphobic, whatever, would look at it and say, yeah, that's kind of vile. You're going too far, is now seen as the average opinion, the average viewpoint for these people. And this comes from me making this post on Blue Sky about how I just believe I should use social media way less because of how depressing and dreary everything is, especially now, given our current political climate. It used to be a Twitter thing about discourse and whatever, but now it just goes far beyond that. Just the influx of bad news and negativity is just really affecting me mentally. And not just me, it's affecting a lot of people. And I know some people could say, "Whoa, well, Molly, you are not in the US. This doesn't affect you." Yes, it does. One, I have friends, close friends, who are affected by this. And two, do you believe this is not going to bleed into worldwide territory like it did in 2016? It will. And it will have really catastrophic consequences, especially since the far right is pretty much at its highest it's been since the end of World War II. And I do partially blame this on people forgetting how vile the far right was, because unfortunately we don't really have a lot of people to tell us anymore. Because let's think about the soldiers, World War II veterans. Even the youngest ones are 100 years old. There's probably very few around, and in 10 years' time, by the time it's gonna be 100th anniversary of the war starting, especially, we're lucky if we're still going to have any remain And most importantly, same goes for Holocaust victims, and especially given the narrative that is pushed these days about a lot of victims of Holocaust being silenced because they don't believe in Zionism, for example. And they're like, hey, Palestinian people deserve to be free because through, we have been treated inhumanely, and we should not take our vengeance onto innocent people. It's just messed up how fascism is just kind of coming back. And yeah, I really should use social media less. I'm probably gonna stick around on Discord more, but it's just depressing. And I hate how we don't have much of an option. Like, social media has made us way more polarized and more extreme, and that's by design. And the unfortunate thing is, it's really a matter of you cannot look away, even if you want to, even if it's your only option. You can't, because the thing about the influence of social media these days is that if you're not on social media, you're pretty much as good as dead. And by that I mean, if you stop using social media, it will be as if you never exist or you don't exist, because people's livelihoods depend so much on you being there on social media that people are spending hours and hours there. It is to the point where, and it's also such a fast moving world that if you're not going to be willing to put in the hours, people will just kind of move on without you. And I hate how that is so prevalent. How people are now seen as disposable entertainment. People are seeing each other as disposable more and more. And that is the unfortunate thing. I have a feeling that if I was to full on cold turkey quit social media, all of it, within 6 months, like 3/4 of people would even forget I exist. If not, people are already starting to forget I exist, and I'm still active. Um, Mainly because I quit Twitter, right? And sure, I got a lot of people to follow me back, or at least I got in contact with a lot of people. But I also have lost contact with just as many, and that is the unfortunate reality. Is that if you're not going to be active somewhere, you're pretty much just no different than someone who has died. You are pretty much seen as dead. But probably even less than that, because people who are dead are often remembered, not always, unfortunately. It's so messed up how social media is not just so important for that, but these days you literally need to have a social media presence in order to exist. I've actually read an article about how book publishers these days, they get their books turned down if they do not have a social media presence, because now the duty that the publishers had to do, promotion and whatnot, is pushed onto the person making the book. They have to promote themselves. They have to advertise themselves. Before, it was just the occasional meet and greet and book signing and whatever, appearance on some shitty TV talk show, whatever that was about it. And you would have a bestseller. These days, if you don't advertise yourself, if you don't, pretty much, best way I can describe it, as much as it sucks, the only way for anyone to acknowledge your work, to acknowledge you, to take you seriously, or even to know you exist, is to whore yourself out to the public. You have to whore yourself out to the public in order for the public to even acknowledge your existence. We are pretty much becoming the equivalent of those people who are fucking their way into being promoted. Even if it's not in a literal sense, you literally have to abandon your own dignity and morals and values sometimes in order to get ahead in popularity or something like that. You have to advertise yourself. You have to make yourself as palpable as possible to as many people, and it's so draining that this is the reality that we're living in. It's so depressing knowing that this is pretty much our fate. We have no option but to give our souls, and not even for fame and fortune. No, you have to sell your soul for, I don't know, 300 retweets on a drawing or something like that. You have to. This is not even stepping out of your comfort zone and drawing something that is more palpable. No, you pretty much have to change yourself at your core in order for people to like you. It's pretty much like a combo of Black Mirror and like those shows about celebrity lives or movies or whatever that show how fucked up it is. And it's like, oh, what's your name? Oh, my name is X. No, you're from now on your name is Y. You're like this, this, and this, and this is your thing. And even if that's the complete opposite of who you are, you kind of have to play that persona because that's the way it goes. That's the way people are telling you to play your game. It's just so messed up. It's just so messed up how we have forgotten how to be human. The lack of third spaces makes it so being physically there is harder, and also just in general meeting up new people is harder to do. See, like behaviors such as approaching someone for whatever reason used to be maybe more normal. Of course, unless you were a creep, in which case, yeah. But these days, social interaction is so frowned upon that people are just going to give you the stink eye, even for asking for directions. And I'm not saying I'm innocent in this. Like, I would also probably, like, if someone was to approach me and talk to me, I would also have my anxiety bells ringing. And I hate that. I hate that this is kind of the norm now. We have pretty much isolated ourselves. We have become an isolationist generation and an isolationist world as a whole. And we don't have to be this way. The other day I also talked about the concept of good boredom and bad boredom. And I described it as good boredom is something that is ultimately boring but doesn't leave you miserable. It might even leave you achieved. And bad boredom is something that ultimately doesn't have a positive impact on you and might outright make you feel like shit. And I gave an example of doom scrolling. That is bad boredom because you're pretty much trying to fight boredom by scrolling around, and you just see bad news and bad stuff and discourse and shit that is pretty much designed to get a reaction out of you, to get you mad, to get you to speak up about it. And it just leaves you angry. It just leaves you empty at best. And then there's good boredom. Cleaning around the house. Setting something up. Just things that are not really fun per se by default, but they don't leave you miserable. They may even leave you achieved because, I don't know, you wash the dishes, you feel like you have worked towards a goal. And I remember back in November when I did those 10 days, I do want to resume it probably around summertime. when I was using the XP computer and I didn't have a smartphone, even though I still had social access to social media, I was pretty much using it as little as possible or as little as viable because I was very much um, decent, de- incentivized to use it. And I spent most of those days just installing games. And sure, was it boring? Yes, but it didn't leave me empty. I felt kind of, even though I felt lonely as hell during those times, it also really made me feel content at the same time because sure, it was boring, but I was working towards a goal. I wanted to install every game I had in my on my CD collection, and I was slowly getting there. And I knew that the reward for that is I would get to play those games. There was a reward when you clean around the house. The reward is that you'll have a cleaner house and you'll feel better about yourself because your environment is going to be clean and cozy, and that is rewarding enough. But scrolling mindlessly on social media or TikTok or whatever, it doesn't really do that. It just kind of, it's just there. I don't like the word content, but it's pretty much the best way to describe it. It's just something that is just filler for your brain. It just exists there for existing sakes, I guess. I don't know. It's really frustrating that this is pretty much the default. Again, like I mentioned, it's not even something you can opt out of at this point because we have trained ourselves into being constantly finding ways to not be bored, but at the same time we're still bored, just bored in a different way, in a way that doesn't achieve anything, but time passes by. So like, sure, do you feel less bored? Probably not, but hey, 3 hours have passed, so you can now do something else or you can go to bed. And I think that's kind of a huge reason why I felt like I probably dissociate, but like I felt like I was doing it even more because I just like, oftentimes I would just like scroll for hours or watch YouTube shorts for hours, and it's like, wow, how did the time fly? It was like 2 p.m. just a minute ago, and now it's 10. How did the day fly? And it's because I just had filler for my brain. I didn't do anything meaningful. It was just kind of like quenching your thirst with like drinking sandy water. I don't know, water with sand. It's like, sure, it quenches your thirst, but is it really what you're seeking out? You're probably seeking out just pure water or soda or fruit juice or anything like that. Um, but the problem is that doing that means you have to go to the store or you have to go like make an effort. And the problem with everyone is that it's hard making an effort. We are all just suffering from executive dysfunction to an extent, or it's not even the executive dysfunction. It's sometimes just a matter of I could drink water that's gonna make me feel good. I could go for apple juice, which is gonna make me feel even better. But that would mean I would have to do an effort, and even though this water with sand is not going to really quench my thirst that much, it is going to be kind of a dreadful experience. It's still going to keep me alive, so I'll just go for that because it's the most convenient thing. And yeah, I think checking out social media when I was on the XP computer, it was made so much harder because I couldn't just check notice um, on my phone in bed or whenever I was going to sleep. or watching a movie. So I had to turn on the computer or keep it on just to check out notifications. So there was a matter of intentionality there, which, you know, meant that the very thing that I was doing because it was convenient became inconvenient. So it was a matter of me figuring out my priorities. So I was using social media way less. However, I was trying to use Discord as much as possible. Why? Because I was valuing contact with people more. And sure, I have installed a patch on the XP computer to allow more than 4 gigs of RAM, and now I have 16 gigs. So theoretically, browsing the internet is now viable, and I can do it. But I still would want to reduce it. I mean, I want to reduce it just as is, even if it means that I would have to find ways to keep myself busy. I think that I want to find ways to value my time more. I started reading this book in November that I stopped reading once I stopped the challenge, and I do want to resume. Just unfortunately, there is this huge pitfall of convenience, and it's a pitfall that I, as well as pretty much everyone else, has fallen into. Even our parents, right? Like, I remember when I was a kid, everyone, like, my parents were like, oh, don't stay at the computer for too long. You don't want that to take over your life, right? And I remember last I was living with my parents still, my mom was using her phone way more than I was. She was actively on Facebook more than I was in general on anything. Even old people, like, keep in mind, my mom is 60 now. My parents are in their 60s. They're not, you know, middle age. They're reaching old age now, and they are really just as entrenched in the internet as everyone else. And you'd say, well, what would an old person even engage with? Surprisingly, or enough, or maybe not to many of you, kind of the same thing that we do. We Gen Zers, or later millennials, or early Gen. I don't know who's gonna watch this video. My assumption is it's gonna be my friends, so, you know, it's just gonna be some 20-something-year-olds just like me. The point is, they were pretty much doing similar things to us to some extent. Of course, not the same trends, no skeebidying around, but my mom was in multiple groups discussing shows and whatever she was watching, and there was so much toxicity, arguments, people screaming at each other, insulting each other. I remember one day I was helping out my mom with her laptop when she was still using it, and I remember she had a tab for Facebook on messages, and there were a ton of message requests, and I clicked to see if there was any scams or spammers. Most of them were from people from that group insulting her, making very personal attacks, not just about her, but about, like, her family, her friends, everyone, insulting me, who I wasn't even involved. They were just trying to go after anyone at that point. And it was kind of similar to how people really approach discourse online. They make personal attacks on someone, even on things that are completely unrelated from the topic. Meanwhile, my dad, he is unfortunately one of the people who are falling down this right-wing pit, or so it seems. He's just kind of unfortunately posting a lot of questionable stuff. I remember he was posting some actually anti-Semitic things, and not himself, but he was like reposting the, the theories about people owning this and this and this, just that kind of stuff. It sucks. And what sucks is that was a thing I was seeing for a while even before I left. It's even worse now that I have moved out, and that meant that they had nobody to have to like keep them in check, because if my dad would say something, I would at least like debate him on it, or say, hey, this is wrong, this is not true, and here's why. But now he just doesn't have any person that would be willing to have healthy discussion. So he's just kind of falling in deeper. And you may say, well, why don't you have that healthy discussion with him online? Well, it's online, so it's not that much of a necessity. Not to mention, I'll be honest, I don't really want to keep going, especially since my parents are not the best. They are far from good. So it's best I keep my distance for my own safety. Like, they're not gonna do anything to me. Like, I'm not saying that they will, but at the same time, I would rather keep some sort of just on lack of involvement at this point, especially because the main topic at hand I want to approach is how this influx of everything is so overwhelming. It's overwhelming to me, and it's overwhelming to many. And I hate how, like, the only ways I see kind of reaching a bliss is by lowering the amount of social media and stuff. I'm thinking of even buying one of those Japanese flip phones that do have some, Android and smart functionality, so I can still use Discord, but at the same time, it's made way harder. Although, I'm not sure how excited I would be to using T9 again to send a message. Yeah. I'll have to think about it. I want to relearn HTML, or find a way to make my own website, have my own little blog. It would be really nice having something for myself. Even if nobody's gonna check it out, I would still love having that option, having the opportunity to branch out and have my own freedom. And I've been using a lot of dedicated devices too. I've been using my iPod, and I want to mod one very soon, so I have maximum storage and battery and whatever. I've been having this first gen iPhone SE on the side that if I want to use, I can use, and that could still give me a more restricted way of access, because the battery is kind of shit. I heard that's like a thing with iPhone SEs, especially the first gen, but in general, the battery just kind of drains within hours. So while I could still use it for Twitter and Discord, and well, I don't use Twitter, Discord and Blue Sky and whatever, it's highly discouraged, and it would only encourage me using it, using either when I need to. So that might be something I might consider. Again, I have no idea. This is just me venting and ranting about this stuff, because I have no idea what else I could do at this point. Situation is really dire, and yeah, to conclude everything and to repeat myself, just I hate how the one thing I was using to escape from the reality of the world is now the reality of the world, but worse. like everything bad about it. But hopefully things will get better somehow, someday. We can only hope, you know? We can only hope.